Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's workshop. So it's time to get back to work on the dress shop now that the rooms for the guests are in order in the rooming house. Now, if you're new to the channel, I'm actually working on 2 doll houses, and this project is for the Dress Shop Dollhouse. Now, this bed is for a doll named Aunt Janie, and there's just recently they had a decision made to move their room to the 3rd floor so that they can go ahead and set up the sewing room and the showroom for the dress shop. Now, I want you to be mindful that the 3rd floor is not complete. The floors have not been installed. There are no curtains, and the partition or wall that separates it from the office has not been installed either. But I figure at least I can prepare Aunt Janie a beautiful bed. Now, there's already a bed dressed for Aunt Bess, so we're not worried about hers. And I have this lovely piece of fabric. I've had it for some time. It's a remnant from a quilting project my mother had. So I'm just showing myself just hemming the edges of the bedspread before I add the 2nd layer. Now, I'm not going to be real detailed in showing you how to do this bed because I've done several beds here on the channel. I will leave links in the description for other beds that I've done, but I'm just doing a quick fitted sheet for her mattress before I add the finishing touches to the bed. Now that the mattress is complete, I'm going to go ahead and fit this blanket on top, and it fits really nice. It's going to have a nice drop. I do want to leave a little bit of space because I want to do an extra treatment or a decorative element around the edges of the bed. Now, I've never done this particular thing before with the beds, but I do want to add a ruffle that we used to call them dust ruffles. And I'm using a thin strip of fabric from a napkin that I had that I thought was really, really pretty. It had a nice little design around the edge, and I thought that would look really pretty as a ruffled bed skirt. So here I am using my water and glue solution, and now I'm pinning my little piece of fabric to a piece of foam core that is covered with clear packing tape. Now I'm going to allow this to dry overnight so I can pin it to the bed. Now I went on to work on my pillows, got those all together, and you see my little pillow peeking out from inside of the pillowcase. And here I'm just adding a little decorative element. I had a little flower, and I thought that would look pretty on the outside of Aunt Janie's pillowcase. So while the pillowcase and the ruffle was drying, I wanted to add another dimension to the blanket so that when I fold it back, you'll see another color or another fabric print. And you know, dolls, I don't like matchy-matchy, but I do like things to coordinate. So this little piece of fabric was a scrap, and it was in the same color tones as the main part of the blanket, kind of like a minty green. So I'm just adding this to the top so when I fold the blanket back, that's what will show. I do have to allow that to dry, but it's all hemmed and ready to go. Now, after the blanket was good and dry and everything was fully attached, I folded it back a little bit the way I wanted it to be on the bed. And I did make another pillow that is the same print as the fitted sheet to go along with the decorative pillow. Now here I'm just fitting the blanket on the bed to make sure it hangs at the right length so that it'll still leave a little room for my dust ruffle to show. And I'm covering the mattress so that it won't get wet when I wet the blanket with the water and glue solution to give it the shape that I want it to have. Now, dolls, there are many ways to achieve this look. Some people use starch, others use fusible web and wire mesh. But dolls, honestly, I always default to the water and glue because one thing I have plenty of, and that is glue. After I got the bedspread pinned down in the shape that I wanted it, I set it aside and allowed it to dry overnight so it would be firm when I completed the assembly of the rest of the design. So dolls, I allowed the bedspread to dry on top of the aluminum foil shaped on top of the mattress overnight so that it would be nice and firm before I decorated the bed. And here I am just removing the pins. And I also removed the pins from the dust ruffle. So now we're ready for the fun part, actually pulling the design all together. So to attach the dust ruffle dolls, I simply added an ample amount of tacky glue to the side rail of the bed and pressed the dust ruffle right into it and allowed it to dry in place. And I went on to do the exact same thing on the other side of the bed. I added an ample amount of glue and gently pressed the ruffles right into the glue on the side rail of the bed. Now there was one more thing I needed to do. I needed to add a ruffle to the end of the bed to complete the look. And so I had a third ruffle that I made. It's actually longer than what I really needed, but I wanted it that way in case I needed extra. And then I trimmed it down to fit the edge along the end of the bed and then added glue to that portion as well. Now I want you to pay special attention here because you really want it to look seamless. You don't want it to look like fragmented pieces. Now I added it along the edge and pressed it into the glue, but I was very careful to make sure I finished it neatly around the corners because when it's complete, I don't want to see the legs of the bed or the bed post. Now you see I left the extra piece extended on that end, but I just wanted to let you see what the ruffles look like. Now let's go down to the end of the bed and let me show you what I did to finish it off. So you see that little part there? I wanted that to blend together a little bit more neatly. So I added a thin bead of glue inside one of the ruffles and then tucked the little piece behind it so that they would stick together and look like one continuous piece all the way around. Now let's go ahead and add the bedspread, which is already hardened. I dropped it right on top of everything. It feels like a little shell. Now keep in mind, the more glue you add to your solution, the firmer your finished product will be. But that really works out well for me, dolls, because it's easy for me to control the shape of the bed. And then there you have the little bed skirt peeking out. I think that looks really good. And I'm really, really pleased with the way the colors turned out, the peach and the green and the ecru. I think it looks really, really nice. And then the colorful bedspread underneath. There's her pillow with the little lace on it. And then the little decorative pillow with the little flower and the striped pillow peeking from underneath. I think that looks really nice. I think Aunt Janie will be really pleased with her bed. So now let me take a quick picture and then we can go see what's happening among the dolls. So there's Aunt Bess. She's on the third floor in the area that should be the office. And here is her and Aunt Janie's bedroom. Aunt Janie's bed is looking beautiful. Yeah, but that floor looks pretty bad. There's still so much work to be done on this floor. There are no curtains up, but they made the decision to go ahead and open up the dress shop even though everything is not complete. Oh, look, a framed picture of Aunt Janie and Aunt Bess when they were younger women. That's going to look nice in the showroom. And there's Aunt Bess in the doorway, a little bit disgusted about how the floor looks, but she is happy the dress shop will be opening soon. So dolls, here I am in the actual sewing room. This is the room where all the sewing machines are going to be. So I had quite a few ideas and I have tons of accessories to put in this room. So I'm really feeling challenged on how I'm going to make all of that happen. I'm kind of feeling like I made more accessories than the room can handle. Now this is a little shelf that I made with a garment rack or garment pole on it. Got a little pair of pants hanging there. Not sure where it's going to hang because it looks like it's going to take up a lot of room. Now this is a cabinet I originally wanted down in the showroom to put things inside the little cubbies. And I definitely think I better keep it in the showroom because it takes up too much room up here in the sewing room. So let me see what else I can get up here. So I decided that the ironing board has to go in here, but I'm going to just start to place some of the accessories, the bolts of fabric, and the sewing machines to kind of get a feel of how everything is going to look and where it's going to sit. So I need to make sure I leave room for the door to swing open. So I've got a jar of buttons and more bolts of fabric. Well, I've got a lot of accessories to get in this room. And then there's the other sewing machine. That's the little red one I made. Now, dolls, I will leave a link in the description for when I made a lot of these accessories in some earlier videos. Now, that's going to be Aunt Bess's chair because she's the head seamstress in the house. And there's a nice chair for Aunt Janie when we get her sewing machine in here. So, dolls, I'm just going to allow you to watch me play for a moment. I really have no rhyme or reason as to what I'm doing right now. I'm just trying to place as many things in the room to see how much I can actually fit. I did make quite a few accessories, a lot of things to sit around on the floor because I really want this to be a really crowded, almost chaotic looking sewing room. So just bear with me as I play to make sense of how I'm going to fit everything in the room. So I've got my ironing board here. I will leave a link in the description of how I made this item as well. And based on the amount of room I have and the amount of items I have, some of the things are going to actually have to go on the wall. Meanwhile, down in the showroom, Lillian and Isabel are having a conversation. Lillian said the sign is not ready. Isabel said the shelves need to be stocked. Isabel even pointed out that there's not a cash register or a counter to ring up sales. And Lillian also pointed out that Thanksgiving and Christmas are just weeks away. How can we possibly get all this done with Aunt Bess piddling around on the third floor? But Lillian said, let's just get what we can get done, and we can't worry about the rest. Aunt Janie and Aunt Bess will have to figure that out. In the meantime, Aunt Janie was working diligently to organize their stock and to confirm what they had in their inventory was enough to get started and to know what they needed to buy for future projects. Meanwhile, back at the rooming house, finally the young couple were allowed to court. Her father had agreed that everything was okay, and everybody was in agreement that the young couple should be together. Sadie was so happy that he just didn't know what to do. And although everyone is in agreement that they should be together, they weren't allowed very much time together. One evening, on her way out of her mother's room, she saw Sadie as he was coming out of his room to go downstairs, and they chatted for a few minutes in the hallway right outside her mom's door. They couldn't talk too much or too loud because Marguerite's mother, Marva, was just on the other side of the door unpacking. So they kept their conversation short and simple until the next time they saw each other. During the courtship, they only had designated times when they could see each other, so when they saw each other in passing, it was always a treat. Marva and Sterling were so excited that their daughter was getting married. They thought Sadie was such a nice young man, and they were excited about planning the wedding and all the plans they had for their daughter. Sometimes between lunch, Sadie would pop in the cafe to see Marguerite when she was cleaning. She would just giggle. Some evenings they were allowed to sit on the couch together and talk while the men were relaxing after dinner. And on other evenings they were allowed to sit in the music room and have polite conversation under the watchful eyes of one of the elders as a chaperone. After several weeks of being chaperoned, one evening, Sadie and Marguerite ended up in the pantry at the same time. Sadie greeted her and asked her what she was doing in the pantry this time of the evening. She said she was on her way to visit her grandmother. He told her he was just leaving the dress shop and he was on his way to his room. He told her he'd walk her up. When they got to the upstairs back hallway, Marguerite started up the steps, and then they began to talk, and they talked some more. They had never been allowed to talk unmonitored before, and it was really nice. They really didn't want the moment to end. Suddenly, Violet came out of her room and said, "Marguerite, what are you doing here?" Marguerite was startled and stuttered and told her that she was on her way to go visit her grandmother's room. And Violet said, "Then that's where you should go. You shouldn't be here on this back hall talking to Sadie." Sadie asked for Violet not to scold Marguerite, that it was his fault. At that moment, Elbert came out and began to talk to the couple. He said, "We're not trying to give you guys problems, but we don't want it to be problems for you all with the elders. It's not proper for her to be talking to you alone in this back hallway. Marguerite, go to your grandmother's room. Sadie, you need to go to your room. We won't tell your parents, but you two need to be careful." Sadie went back to his room. He was a little angry at himself for being so careless. He had to be more mindful and watchful over Marguerite. He was a little bit upset with himself for being so careless. He didn't want to do anything that would put her in a bad light before their wedding. When Marguerite got to the top of the stairs to visit her grandmother, her little sister Mabel was fast asleep. Marguerite checked her brother's room, and Claude was asleep as well. But her grandmother wasn't there. She couldn't imagine where she could be. Disappointed that she hadn't talked to her grandmother, she went back to her room, and guess who was there? Her grandmother was sitting in her room just as peaceful as an angel, as though she was waiting for her, like she knew she needed to talk to her. Marguerite ran to her grandmother and dropped her head in her lap. Her grandmother quietly comforted her. After Marguerite stopped crying, she confided in her grandmother as to what happened in the hallway. Her grandmother assured her that she understood how she felt because she remembered being young and in love with her grandfather. But she told her this was a season where she needed to be patient, and her grandmother sternly reminded her, "You should not be alone with Sadi until after you all get married." Marguerite apologized to her grandmother and agreed. One evening after dinner, the boys were fighting again in the hallway over the bike. Marguerite and Sadi were allowed to have a late dinner together that evening, with a chaperone, of course. And when Sadi came to the room, he tried to pull the chair closer to Marguerite so he could sit next to her. And Big Ma told him no, and she pulled his chair back toward the center of the table. Sadi and Marguerite looked at each other and giggled. And Big Ma said, "Sadi, your seat is right here, and don't you move that chair anymore." Sadi was a little bit embarrassed, but he was so excited to see Marguerite, he didn't even care about being embarrassed. After dinner, she sent Marguerite to her room first and made Sadi wait until she thought Marguerite was already in her room. When Marguerite left and went to the laundry room, she didn't go to her room. She hid behind the door. She watched and waited for Big Ma to leave to go to her room. Then she waited quietly for Sadi. She stood waiting in the dimly lit laundry room, waiting for Sadi to exit the dining room. When he saw Marguerite, he was startled, but he was pleasantly surprised. He told her that she shouldn't be there, and she said she knew. He said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I just wanted to see you just for a few seconds. I'm going to go to my room, but I just had to see you." And in that moment, in a short split second, she kissed him and ran away. And suddenly Sadi was suspended in time. He couldn't think. He couldn't blink. He could barely breathe. He just stood there. It's like the whole world was standing still for him in that moment when he realized that Marguerite had kissed him.